Outside the Emirates Stadium stands a statue of a man named Herbert Chapman. Many may not know his name now, but when football was still in its infancy, Chapman was one of the key figures in helping the game grow, playing a huge part in turning football into the game that it is today. He took both Huddersfield and Arsenal to the top of the game and has left an immortal legacy on the game that we love. This is the story of Herbert Chapman, a footballing pioneer. Herbert Chapman was born in Yorkshire on the 19th of January 1878, one of 11 children and the son of a miner. His family were keen on sport, with two of his brothers going on to also play football professionally. Chapman would win a place at Sheffield College, where he studied engineering. Chapman experienced an unremarkable playing career as a forward, being a journeyman across amateur teams. He would sign his first professional contract in 1901 with Northampton Town, and finish as top scorer in his first season at the club. Chapman continued going through different teams throughout his playing career, balancing his playtime with his pursuit of a career in engineering. Chapman had decided to leave the game for good to continue his engineering career, but did a 180 when he decided to return to Northampton Town as player manager. Northampton had finished bottom of the Southern League 2 seasons in a row, but Chapman was about to turn things around. Tactics were not something commonly used in football at the time, but Chapman was keen to change this. He devised team talks on the Friday before the game, being the first man to use the now common magnetic tactics board. He focused on drawing opposition defenders away from their goal and hitting them on the counter-attack, as well as encouraging his defenders to play out from the back. Chapman's tactics worked brilliantly, turning the club's fortunes around. In his first season in charge, Northampton finished in 8th place, and in his second season they won the Southern League title. By now, Chapman was no longer player manager and was focusing on his management full time. He had already shown himself to be a trailblazer, taking Northampton on a tour of Germany in 1909, and he also signed Walter Tull, one of the first black professional players in the game. Second Division Leeds City were aware of his achievements and decided to approach him. With Northampton's blessing, Chapman accepted the offer and returned to his native Yorkshire. Chapman would turn their fortunes around too, taking them to 6th place, as attendances rose by around 5,000 in his first year, due to his exciting, attacking brand of football. He held weekly meetings to discuss the team's tactics, and also allowed players to have an input to give ideas about how to help the team succeed. With most football players often left to work out the tactics themselves, these meetings were years ahead of the times. Leeds City finished 2 points outside the promotion spots the next year, and the outbreak of World War I damaged the team, with attendances now limited, and Chapman's bloated squad led to inconsistency, with them finishing in 15th place. League football would be suspended for the rest of the war, and Chapman decided to help the war effort by working in a munitions factory. Chapman would return after the war, but suddenly resigned in 1918. Leeds City were later found guilty of financial irregularities, with illegal payments to players during wartime fixtures. Leeds City were expelled from the Football League as a result, and Chapman, along with 5 other club officials, were banned from football for life. Chapman by this point was working at an oil and coke works in Selby, but was later laid off. He was approached by Huddersfield Town in 1921, who hoped he would be assistant manager to Ambrose Langley. Huddersfield helped Chapman appeal against his ban, and eventually it was overturned, with Chapman returning to the game. Chapman soon ended up as manager when Langley left to run a public house. Chapman knew there was potential in the squad, and said to the board that they needed a general to lead them. The man he had in mind was Aston Villa defender Clem Stevenson, who was signed for Huddersfield for £4,000. Stevenson was joined by 18-year-old forward George Brown, who would go on to be the club's all-time top scorer. In his first full season, Huddersfield finished 14th, but they still had their day in the sun. Chapman's side defeated Preston 1-0 in the FA Cup final to seal their first ever major trophy. Chapman used the funds from the cup run to strengthen his squad and took them to 3rd place in the league next season. Their campaign after that, they reached new heights. In 1924, Huddersfield won the First Division on goal average, cementing their place as champions of England for the first ever time. Chapman kept faith in his squad as they reclaimed the trophy the next campaign. They went through that season without conceding more than 2 goals in a single match. Chapman had worked wonders at Huddersfield, but his time there was soon coming to an end. Chapman had always been keen on the idea of coaching in London, and in the summer of 1925, he spotted an advertisement in the Athletic News asking for applicants for the position of manager at Arsenal. Arsenal offered Chapman a salary of £2,000, double what he earned at Huddersfield. Chapman was appointed Arsenal manager in 1925. The appointment coincided with a change in the rules of the game, with the offside rule reducing the number of opposition players needed between the attacker and the goal from 3 to 2. Chapman signing Charlie Buchan suggested moving the centre-half from midfield to defence in order to fill a gap and provide a bigger defensive wall. This helped inspire the famous WM formation synonymous with Chapman. The formation worked as a 3-4-3, with inside forwards dropping deep to help the midfield and create space for the other attackers. Arsenal had been threatened by relegation before Chapman's arrival, but once again he would be the man to turn fortunes around. In his first season, Arsenal finished in 2nd place, with Chapman's former ploys in Huddersfield pipping them to the title. Chapman took time to build the team, as Arsenal spent much of the 1920s in mid-table. He continued in developing the game though, bringing in physiotherapists to ensure his players were in peak physical condition, and continued to encourage discussion amongst his team about game plans. Team bonding exercises were common, with golf trips away often arranged by Chapman to increase squad harmony. He also looked beyond Blighty for inspiration, befriending legendary coach of the Austrian Wunder team Hugo Meisel. He regularly arranged trips abroad for Arsenal to face foreign teams, and was an advocate for the idea of a European competition, over 2 decades before the introduction of the European Cup. During a game in Belgium in 1930, Chapman took inspiration from floodlights used at nighttime games, and got some installed at Highbury when the West Stand was built a couple of years later. He designed scoreboards and turnstiles at the stadium himself, and played a part in renaming the Gillespie Road tube station in London to Arsenal. He also petitioned the use of squad numbers and white footballs, things that nowadays we can't picture the game without. Chapman was continuing to develop the game as his Arsenal side slowly grew. Arsenal would reach their first FA Cup final in 1927, but unfortunately lost to Cardiff City. It was a crying shame for the Gunners, but it wouldn't be long until Chapman took them to glory. Chapman would sign forward Alex James, who would go on to be one of Arsenal's greatest ever players, and formed a great partnership with fellow forward David Jack. In 1930, Arsenal reached the FA Cup final again, with Chapman up against familiar faces. Arsenal would play Huddersfield at Wembley. The teams would enter the pitch side by side, in honour of Chapman's contributions to both teams, a tradition that remains at the FA Cup final to this day. An early goal from Alex James and a late strike by John Lambert won the game for Arsenal, and with that, their first ever major trophy. It was the second time Chapman had made a club break their major honour duck, and it was the start of something big at Highbury. Arsenal stormed to the First Division title in 1931, becoming champions of England for the first time in their history. They finished 6 points clear of second place Aston Villa, netting an incredible 127 league goals, and only losing 4 times. It had taken time for Chapman to build his great team, but it had been well worth the wait. The next season would be disappointing, as Arsenal narrowly missed out on a double, finishing second in the league to Everton, and losing the FA Cup final to Newcastle. Arsenal would, however, end up reclaiming their title in 1933, once again scoring for fun, netting 118 league goals. Chapman looked to rebuild his side, bringing in a number of fresh faces, as he aimed to sustain the success he had built. The 33-34 season started promisingly, with Arsenal 4 points clear at the end of the year. However, Chapman would not be there to see the end of the season. Chapman started 1934 by going on a number of scouting trips, observing Bury, then Sheffield Wednesday. Chapman returned to London with a cold. He would watch an Arsenal third team match, but soon afterwards his condition quickly deteriorated. Chapman became bedbound as pneumonia set in, and on the 6th of January 1934, Herbert Chapman died at the age of 55. It was a shock to the footballing world. One of the game's greatest pioneers had been taken away from this earth out of nowhere, and there was a huge void in the game. 4 days after his death, Herbert Chapman was buried, with a number of players that had played for him in Alex James, David Jack, Eddie Hapgood, Joe Holm, Jack Lambert and Cliff Bustin serving as pallbearers. Arsenal would go on to win 3 more league titles in the 1930s, with Chapman's legacy standing strong. He had turned them into the dominant force in English football, and it was a tragedy that he would not live to see the full extent of his masterpiece. The game of football owes Herbert Chapman so much. He played a gigantic part in the game's growth, planting seeds that helped take it from the bare bones to what we know it as today. He turned football from an improvised game into a tactical battle of wits, and so many things we see in the game now can be traced back to Chapman. He lives on immortally in the beautiful game, and without him, Arsenal may never have won a major honour and could well have been lost to time. He deserves to be remembered as one of the greats, as without Herbert Chapman, football could well be a very different game.